Smexy Soldier Boy. You can address me with those eyes anytime. Okay, so we all expected Final Fantasy VII Remake to look beautiful. That's not exactly why I'm here, although I am going to be covering some graphical changes throughout my little review comparison here. I'm mostly going to be focusing on three things, i.e. pacing, battles, and character models. Also, I think I'm going to touch on music a little bit because just listen to this. Pacing was an interesting one in that the bottom line, beating the first reactor in the original took about 15 minutes. Beating it in the remake took closer to an hour, almost 50 minutes to beat it. And another example is leading up to the intro with Aerith. This part is frame for frame exactly how long it took before I could properly sync up the two. When I was trying to get it when Aerith opened her eyes to sync up with when Aerith appeared in the original. And this part took for flippin' ever to actually line up. But once it did, once the original caught up, it started moving quicker, but it focused on weird points that you really notice more looking back on it now. They would focus on like the city itself, the expansive city that you can see in the distance, rather than the remake where it showed more character development with Aerith. You would see like, oh yeah, she's a little bit small, timid, she's running from something we don't know. But the original one, she comes out and immediately goes to the city, and that's when it zooms out into the, well, what we know, what we recognize. It was kind of weird in that while the classic version was so much quicker to beat, it felt longer than the remake did. The remake took almost 50 minutes to beat, but it felt like 20 minutes.
You're coming with us. Nice and easy.
Don't think so. It's over.
Without getting too much into the battle system here, I can easily say that this was a big problem when it came to pacing. This was what made the original game feel so much longer. Each battle would take at least twice as long as a battle in the remake, and then there was, of course, the after battle screen. So by pure math, the number of battles should have easily evened out, as it were. But funny enough, there were only 9 battles in Final Fantasy VII, barring the random encounter thing, and 18 battles in the remake. And you figure, like, with the math and everything, it should work out fine. But there were actually 3 battles in the remake that took significantly longer than the battles in 7 did, the classic 7. Those were, of course, the sweeper and the boss fight itself, the Scorpion Sentinel. And we had two fights with the sweeper, and then and also that Scorpion. Now, funny enough, that Scorpion boss fight probably accounts for at least a third of the time spent in the remake, on account of it being such a long and in-depth battle. However, like I said, everything felt so much shorter, and the reason for that was you were always doing something.
Why would I?
So what's Soldier Boy's deal? Is he one of us now?
Another good example of just how much pacing can affect how you feel. This is another part that took about twice as long in the remake as opposed to the classic. But at the same time, this part felt so much quicker. And yes, it comes down to the fact that for the classic game, you are reading the whole time. Whereas this one, it talks to you. You have movement, you have activity, you are entertained. And as much as I love the classic Final Fantasy VII, this is a definite significant improvement and shows you just how much pacing can affect your game.
Wedge.
You better be worth the money, Merc. Every last gil.
Okay, so you knew this was going to happen because I just loved it and it's so beautiful. So now we're going to have to take a look at all of the various different upgrades and character models. I think I'm just going to stick to the original ones, the characters, the actual playable characters. Okay. Meet Cloud Strife and get to like him because he's going to be the person you see for a majority of the game. He, from his very introduction, basically exudes BA-ness. So, ew, BA-ness. But anyway, so you're going to have to get used to and like this character because he is going to be everywhere for a large majority of the game. And I think they do him justice in making him look very good. Back in the before times of 1997, all they could really manage for him was this blocky polygon Popeye-armed little sucker. And then later on, after great many different upgrades, we now have the soldier we know today as Cloud Strife. Apart from the obvious graphical enhancements that they were able to give the character in the remake, there were a great number of other things, from the movements. They feel more fluid to his actual structure. He actually feels like somebody who would be a soldier. And then, of course, in the way only they could, they captured his serene power in the facial expressions and the movements. Aerith in this installment was vastly improved. I mean, you can see the very textures on her jacket from before, when you may have thought maybe it's a leather jacket, maybe it's just a shirt. Here you can see very clearly it's a denim jacket. And moreover, this one demonstrates the elements of environmental storytelling, character-driven narratives. You can see her looking down and you can see the peace she finds in the Mako. You can see her running from something. You can see how she interacts with the world around her, from the bump to the flower that gets stepped on, and you're like, wow. And I love this part in particular because of that storytelling aspect.
This pump's sole purpose is to drain the planet dry. While you sleep, while you eat, while you shit, it's here sucking up Mako. It doesn't rest, and it doesn't care. You do realize what Mako is, don't you? Mako is the lifeblood of our world. The planet bleeds green like you and me bleed red. The hell you think's gonna happen when it's all gone, huh? Answer me! You gonna stand there and pretend you can't hear the planet crying out in pain? I know you can!
You really hear that?
Damn straight I do!
Get help.
Say that again!
Barrett Wallace is the official old dad of the Avalanche group that you get to play with in the beginning here. And I mean, without getting too much into all the other stuff that I covered in the previous sections, because they all apply to him as well, from displaying his emotions so much stronger and his character model being so much more impressive, like especially the fact that he's got a shirt on now. I'm sorry, I wasn't a big fan of him running around with just bandages and a jacket, because bandages aren't a shirt. I'm sorry. Without getting too much into that, I do love like just everything that they've done with the character, because if you played through Final Fantasy VII, the original, you know that Barrett is ruled by emotion. He's bigger and stronger than Cloud and older than Cloud, but at the same time he lacks a lot of the skill and the training, and you can really see that come through in the remake's character, from his facial expressions to how he gets angry and shakes and everything. And especially to the last scene that he's in, where Barrett is, upset, raging, and he wants the elevator to hurry up and get there. But then he looks back at Cloud and he's like, oh, this guy's doing all right. Maybe I should calm down a little bit. Also, Jesse's just beautiful. Okay, so we are going to talk about the combat system and the changes that came with the remake. Now, immediately, the changes are very obvious, obviously.
Heads up.
What in the hell?
Any long-term fan of Final Fantasy will immediately notice the first thing that's missing is the swirl into battle. Now, of course, it varied from Final Fantasy title to Final Fantasy title, but a majority of them had some sort of initiation when it came to a battle, because all of the battle systems up until 12 were, random encounters. You wouldn't see the monsters. You'd just be running around the map, and all of a sudden, swoosh, battle. And that is missing from this one. I can't say as I miss it, because at the same time, as it does have a nostalgic feel to it, I wasn't really hip to the whole alternate battle scene. I mean, sure, it's what I grew up with, but, it just kind of took you out of the world. And that's why I've always loved the whole fluid, you see the monsters on the field, you run up, you smack them, and you're fighting. I always loved that. The next big and most obvious change is, of course, the fact that combat is active in Final Fantasy Remake, whereas in Final Fantasy VII, even the most active combat is slow and passive. You have to wait for your bar to charge. You can't do anything until your bar is charged. One of the things I was most worried about with the remake was the spell casting and item using system. It's been common among every Final Fantasy that you use your items and you use your spells, and with a turn-based combat like Final Fantasy has been in the past, there was no issue with it. But then comes along with Final Fantasy 15, where they include their magic system, and their magic system was dumb. I rarely ever used it, rarely ever wanted to use it. So I was worried that I was going to see more of the same with Final Fantasy VII Remake, but they found a way to incorporate it as not only a full action game, but they still include the turn-based combat from the original classical Final Fantasies. And that, in my opinion, beyond genius, man. It just made the combat feel so much smoother. I know it does still slow down the battle a little bit to cast your spells, but at the same time, it just feels like you're more in control of your characters. And comparing that to 15 again made it just so complicated. You have to craft your spells, you have to throw your spells, you have to put them in the right place. Hopefully you got the right spell equipped, and it's just annoying because here you've got your spells. You don't need to worry about making them or have the right one. One thing I found really interesting about Final Fantasy VII Remake was that, and I made mention of this when I played it on my other channel, was that the battles felt more like raid battles or boss battles from an MMO. And that sort of was, don't get me wrong, Final Fantasy has had bosses with phases and whatnot, and this one is not different. You got the EM field thing you need to drop, and then after you've dropped that, you have to blow his legs off, you have to avoid his tail laser, and like he jumps on the wall. And I just found it really interesting to see it in action in this world like this. Like if you take, for instance, Final Fantasy VII, the classic, the extent of a phase change for this boss fight was it raises its tail and will counterattack when you attack, so just ignore fighting. But the remake's boss fight actually goes through 3 different phases, from the first part where it's just a head-on battle, to the second part when you have to destroy the EM field, to the third part when it's stationary and you have to break its legs. Now, it also has several different attacks that make sure you keep on your toes. You have to keep moving. And this in itself adds to what I talked about in pacing. This makes the battles feel shorter, quicker, more engaging, and you don't feel like you're just sitting there waiting for your turn. Because we all know that's not how it works in real life. You just get punched or you don't punch. There you go. Admittedly, after everything I've talked about, I have very little gripes, but I do have a few more concerns, and I do that. But let's get started with this real quick. Again, 97 was a long time ago, but I do remember that Jessie was one of the biggest unsung heroes of the original game, and I really loved her character. And as such, there are two gripes and worries, minor as they are, about her character in this one.
Have fun.
My first issue is this outfit. Now, back in the day, I very much thought that she was wearing a tank top, and I thought, oh, that's a pretty cool looking outfit. She got a tank top over a long sleeve shirt over some pretty cool khaki pants. And, you know, if you compare the two, they don't look all that different. In picture to picture, they translated well. But I do have an issue with armor like that because it's a bit impractical. I mean, for one thing, if you're going to forge armor specifically around the chest area instead of a one-size-fits-all, then if you have any sort of growth at all, it's going to affect it. And if you try to buy it wholesale, then chances are it's not going to fit. And wearing a bra that doesn't fit is nothing compared to wearing metal that doesn't fit. Yeah, I know. Small gripe. My biggest worry about this character can really be extended to basically the entire Avalanche group, because they're adding more, they're changing things, they're altering the characters, they're adding more personality to them. And that, of course, is not necessarily bad, especially considering where they come from. But at the same time, what if it's done wrong? I know this is weird, but I don't want to see these three characters, three of my favorite side characters in the entirety of Final Fantasy, suddenly being replaced by people I don't recognize. So far, I like what they've done with them, and I'm glad I get to see more of them. But, you know, the worry's still there. My next gripe comes in the form of episodic content. Now, arguably, there's nothing wrong with it. In fact, you could even say that Final Fantasy in itself is very episodic because it comes in installments. Final Fantasy 1, 2, 3, 4, 7, 15. But there's a lot of big worry behind this because we have a team that has done exceptionally well on making what we have at the moment. What's going to happen in a couple years when they're working on the next episode if parts of the team leave, parts of the team get fired, something happens, we don't get the same storytellers, we get people who don't agree with what was done before, so they want to change it. And that sort of thing makes me nervous because I know, especially in the world today where people are like, I want to make this my own, that things like that can happen. Now, admittedly, I know contracts exist. People are probably contracted to do Final Fantasy VII until it's done. But that also raises the other question of how long until it's done. I mean, I've told you I've been waiting for this one since 97. Well, not entirely true, but you know what I mean. It's been a while. And to think about doing the next few series, next few episodes of this, how long are we going to have to wait between episodes? Is it going to be a year? Is the next episode going to be PS5? Are we going to be able to play this one on the PS5? You know, lots of questions that come up as gripes and concerns about the episodic nature of this content.
It's a good thing I know someone who can get us the passcodes. Pity no one else at command will talk to us, but what can you do?
My last big worry comes in the form of the changes. Now, they're making it episodic because they're also making the game bigger. Like the Midgar section, which, you know, fairly simple 10-15 hours to play through, is now supposed to be over 20-30 hours. And that's a lot of content to add. And that worries me, again, because when you start changing things, you start changing the original form. And that makes me worried because I loved the original story. Now, admittedly, like this part right here, some of the changes were a little bit better because this one kind of clarified on something from the original. But, like, for the most part, we used to think Avalanche was just the 4 people and Tifa maybe. But now we have, an upper chain of command? And, like, the Rufus had an assassination attempt. We have a lot more questions than we used to have. And that probably means a lot of changes to the story. I'm both excited for them and also incredibly worried about them because I don't want my Final Fantasy, I know, ownership, I don't want that to be ruined by somebody. I know, weird. But anyway, in conclusion, what I have to say is that despite my worries, despite my gripes, despite my complaints, I am incredibly excited for this. This game looks beautiful, looks like they have put a lot of work into it, a lot of effort, and I'm very proud of the team that's worked on this. I don't know exactly who they are, but my props to them, because this game so far has the same feel to it, the same energy to it. Now granted, like I said, pacing is far different, where an hour in this game can feel a lot quicker than an hour in the previous game, but as comes with the time. The battles are fun, exciting, engaging, not just a simple wait your turn. The characters are beautifully modeled, and I love the improvements, most part. And just overall, this entire game I am so excited for, because it's not just the nostalgia, but it's just great to see something beautiful brought forward into this generation that the kids can enjoy, says the old fart sitting in his chair. But I hope you guys are just as excited for this as I am. And thank you so much for watching this video. Hopefully you enjoyed it, and if you did, please go ahead and poke that like button for me. If you'd like to see more from me, make sure to hit that subscribe button. And of course, as always, you're more than welcome to leave a comment down in the comment section down below, and I'll get back to you as soon as I can, when I can, if I can. You know all that jazz. And tune in next time for another video at another time. And until then, good night.